Welcome to Ninon Speaks Media Image. I am your host for the whole hour. We've got a lovely hour coming up, and I'm your host for the incredible show. We have a wonderful woman today, and I'm reading her bio, and it's just amazing. But let me just get back to Ninon Speaks Media Image is a platform where I give people like my guest today to actually let us understand what they do and how they do it, and give them a little bit of PR. And so that if we need them at any time, we know where to go and how to get them. And there's nothing like finding out actually from the actual person what they do. And I find this very interesting as well. I learn a lot by it, as well as my audience. My audience absolutely love this because they can actually see what is going on and what is happening. As we all know, internet TV is the thing now. Everybody wants to be on it. I also have a program that I teach as well for people to have their own internet TV show. How we can brand them, how we can put them out there, how they can produce and have their own show going, and actually sort of put their own program out there and do what they need to do with what they have either created, what they have either invented, or even trying to even be a host. So that's what I teach as well. But anyway, let's get back to my guests today. And our guests are always very fascinating and very interesting. And sometimes I wonder, where do they all come from? But with this sort of, internet, you kind of get to know an awful lot of people all over the world. My guest today is actually coming out of Florida, and her name is Dr. Amelia Kemp. She is a licensed psychotherapist and a metaphysician, bridging spirituality and principles with the mental health. She has a list here of things she has done, which is absolutely amazing. She has written over 500 articles on mental and emotional well-being, published in newspapers and magazines. But I'm going to take over to Dr. Amelia Kemp, because I think she's better at telling her own story than I am. So Amelia Kemp, Dr. Amelia Kemp, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for such a gracious introduction. It's 50 articles, by the way, not 500.
Oh, well, it could be 500. I said, it could be 500, easily. But you've done so much in your life and starting out as a young lady. And I would like to know first, how did you start out and how did you get evolved into all this?
Sure. Well, I think because of the fact that at one point I also had to heal myself from mental and emotional issues that I grew up with and had experienced, from depression and anxiety and panic attacks.
And how old were you when you had all that?
Those began when I was around 8 years old.
Why do you think, and I'm going there for a very good reason, because we have a lot of problems with our younger generation, exactly what you're talking about, which actually was then as well, but it was never sort of publicized or it was never out there. Why do you think, did you bring this on yourself, or was it brought on through the family environment?
Well, initially I was told that it was based on the family environment, but naturally, as a metaphysician and becoming a psychotherapist myself, I later learned that it was still the focusing of my thought. My age didn't necessarily have anything to do with it, but it was just a constant focus on the negative things that were happening in my environment when I was a child versus focusing on the good things that were happening. And so as I went seeking answers myself, the traditional model of getting the regular therapy that most of us get and all of that was a little bit helpful, but it wasn't sustaining, and I couldn't understand what was going wrong. And so I started seeking alternative and holistic solutions, and that's when I started finding the answers that healed me and brought me back into alignment with the fullness.
And how old were you when you first went to therapy?
12.
12 years old. Was that your choice or was that your family's choice?
That was my primary care physician's choice, because my family didn't like the idea of me going to therapy, telling the family secrets. And so it was the doctor's recommendation. At that point, I was fainting all the time. And so we were going through the medical model trying to figure out why was I fainting. And
Why were you fainting all the time? Well, anxiety, I guess.
They said it was anxiety, yes. And so the anxiety of the types of things that was happening in my household, and I had been a victim at that time of being molested and that type of thing from a boarder that lived in the basement. And so there were actual things that certainly precipitated the anxiety. but no one had a broad view of it back then. And so it was only the focus on the problem versus the focus on the solution. And that's where the alternative healing came in, where they gave me more of a hope. I didn't feel sick and defective or damaged anymore. I was told that that didn't have anything to do with my future, that I could still be happy and go on and live the life that I'm living.
Even though you've been through all this, being molested, and how old were you when you were molested? 12 years old?
Well, no, it was an incident that happened from 3 to about 6 years old. It was ongoing when I was younger, but I didn't tell anyone, and the symptoms of the fainting and stuff kept happening through my childhood, and it wasn't until 12 years old that I actually got therapy for it.
And you actually felt, I'm going somewhere with this because I want to reach the younger people that this is happening a lot too at the moment, because I happen to be involved in a program out here in Vegas on trafficking. And trafficking is exactly this. It's young girls, and they're 6, 7, 8, 12 years old. They're this kind of age. But what made you, or why did you suddenly at 12 years old decide that you kind of had enough, and you felt, because you're still very, very young, but you felt you needed some help and you needed to tell somebody, and because of what did go on, your family obviously didn't want to open this book or this can of worms, so they didn't want it out there. So what made you kind of go behind their backs and go to the doctor who you went to?
Well, I didn't go behind their backs because it was the feigning that actually got me to the doctor. And since they had been doing multiple tests through most of my childhood and couldn't find anything, one doctor just happened to have been kind enough to say, hey, is everything all right at home? And so he started asking me probing questions. And I think he must have thought that something was happening with my parents. But I explained to him that, no, my parents were not abusing me, that it was a monster down the basement, and he wanted to know who the monster was. And I explained that it was a man who was living down the basement, and that he threatened that he would harm me if I told my parents. So my parents never even knew. No one in the family knew. I didn't tell until the doctor. And so then another adult tried to molest me also at 12. And at that time, I got out of the house, and I told my sister. That time I did tell. And so, but at that point is when the anxiety and all of that was diagnosed, because they really thought it was some type of, I think they probably thought I was having epilepsy or something with the fainting. They didn't attach it to
Well, they had no idea what was going on, and you couldn't say anything. And this is happening, I mean, all over the world this is happening, that with these young girls that actually cannot, say anything or do anything because they're petrified. And these men, they say this publicly because they know that these young people cannot say anything and will not say anything because they're so frightened to do that. So they sort of threaten them. So from there, you went in. Now, why did you give up all the doctors and do it, on your own?
Because most of them, I think people tend to immediately have empathy, of course, when something like that's happening to anyone, even if they're adult, not alone a child. But I didn't like the idea that people seemed to have felt sorry for me. They felt that my life had been altered in a way that it couldn't ever be happy again, and I didn't like the sound of that. And so with each therapist that I had seen working on it, they were very kind to me, but it was basically not sustaining, and it felt like I had to keep telling that same story over and over again, and I couldn't accept once I became an adult that, are you telling me that the reason I'm not happy now is still because of something that happened to me when I was 4, 5, 6 years old? That didn't make sense to me. So no, I wanted to
also that didn't make sense to you, but you were listening to all the doctors. Each one of them was saying the same sort of thing, right?
Yes, yes.
And they were giving you a negative, like you'll never be the same. You're always going to live this. You're always going to remember this. There's no way out of this paper bag.
Exactly, and that didn't resonate within my spirit, and so I like the idea that they gave me empathy and wanted me to be okay with what happened, but I didn't want to just be a survivor is what they were calling me. I wanted my joy, I wanted my happiness, and I sought out to seek it. So I decided, let me become a therapist myself and figure out what's going on. And then I got a lot of answers through therapy, but I realized that it still really did focus on everybody's past. And I wanted to understand, well, what about the spiritual aspects of who I was? And I was told that had to be separate from mental health, that if I wanted to focus on that, I needed to go into pastoral counseling versus mental health. And I wanted to understand how come it couldn't be a bridge with both. And so
did you not work in a mental health? You did. You were the director of the mental health counseling with the school board.
Yes, and
Now,
I did. And so I'm still a psychotherapist.
So did you get all your certificates, and did you go to a school to become a therapist?
Yes. I'm a licensed psychotherapist.
So you had all the credentials, you had everything, and then why did they hire you? What was the reasoning?
Well, at that point, because I was just great at what I did, and they obviously understood that part. But at that point, I was sort of more of a closet holistic healer, because I had been cautioned not to share the non-traditional aspects with clients. So I honored that, and so I didn't bring that up when I was the director of mental health in the school board. But I noticed that these kids and their families were facing many of the same things I had faced, and it seemed like it was fragmented because we were only focusing on the social aspects and the mental health aspects. We were still leaving out the spirituality part, which is supposed to be the eternal part of us. So it wasn't until I went into private practice and left the school board that I couldn't deny anymore that something was missing. And so I started to give my clients a choice between holistic healing or traditional. And that's
traditional. Now, you learned through the school board and the mental department, you learned an awful lot there of what to do in your private practice, because you had, as much as they never knew what you went through, so they had no idea what you went through. So you were listening to a lot of these families and these children and what was going on, and you're seeing the whole picture as of, well, they told me that and it didn't work, and I went and did this, so I can see you have the same predicament as I had, because they seem like, and I see a lot of these institutes do the same thing. They count you all as the same thing. You're all the same. There is no difference between any one of you, and they treat you all the same, and you're not all the same. You're all totally different, of different things that happen to you.
Well, I think that what you're speaking to is what I was reaching for, and the fact that there needed to be, in the school system they call them IEPs, individual education plans, but I felt there needed to be ISPs, individual soul plans, in the sense that everybody came forth with their own divine intentions, and that it couldn't be cookie cutter, that we could look at what the DSM or the ICD, the International Classification of Diagnosis, states, but I felt that needed to be utilized to its logical conclusions, and that we needed to be able to be more flexible with that.
Absolutely.
What I extracted from my experience there was wonderful. I loved what I was doing, but in private practice, I had the freedom now to add this holistic alternative option for clients and give them a choice for those
when you had all the certificates, you had all the training, you had everything. Is this not the same? This might, I'm sure you do know about this, but it's like ADD, ADHD. You know, give them a pill and send them back to school. And that's not so, and they do that with so many children to shut them up, so now they have a quiet, contented class they don't have to worry about anymore, because they've given them this pill, which is the same sort of thing as what you were doing, giving everybody the same thing and not really treating each one, or, as you say, spiritually, of trying to resolve this whole thing.
Well, even within the context of traditional, there are individual treatment plans. So it's not as cookie cutter as everybody one size fits all, but what was missing was the spiritual aspect. So we did tailor it to each person. But as far as ADHD, for instance, there is a standard of care with that. And I felt that there needed to be flexibility, because it's okay for a child to move around, and it's okay for a child to also have what I call panoramic sensing without them needing to be shunned for that or told to sit still, and that they would be outside of the box if they weren't. But I didn't have the freedom to influence that system with my ideas. I kept it quiet until I got into private practice, because I had to honor the employer that I was working for. But in private practice, parents were very relieved when they saw that I had a different meaning and attachment to ADHD versus seeing a child bouncing off the walls. Just hearing me say, well, I think they have panoramic sensing, and they have this ability to sense things instantly and want to embrace it instantly from a soulful place, the parents would light up and they feel like, oh, so you mean my child's not sick? I said, no, they're not sick, they're sacred. That's my little line. You're not sick, you're sacred, because we all come forth with differences, and I felt that their objection to conforming and complying with a system or a box was within their right. But beyond that, when treating so many adults that I treated as a private practice practitioner, I wanted them to also have the option of utilizing spirituality, not religious paths, but just universal spiritual principles within the treatment plan, so that they could understand the fullness of who they were, and that they too were not sick, that they were sacred. And so the 8 steps that I developed in the book came out of what brought me back into alignment, because I've been healed now for the best part of 2 decades. And it's mainly because of this new meaning and this new description and new interpretation that I've brought to all 170 diagnoses, so that people don't have to feel like they're sick and defective, and know that they too can go on and live the happy life that they came forth into the
That's always been my thing with ADD and ADHD. That's always my thing, that these are very special children that absolutely happen to be very talented and don't want to sit in a chair for 2 or 3 hours, and then they have to be given a pill to shut up. And it's always been very, very crucial with me, because I always think they've got such great talent that they're actually diminishing, because I mean they say there's cocaine in a lot of the stuff they take, and to calm them down and bring them down, and now they become drug addicts at 15, 16 years old, and they want more stuff. So it's sort of but why do more, or what I see is more boys have ADHD or ADD than girls? Any particular reason? I always see more boys have it.
I think that because of the natural propensity for society, the conditioning of girls to be ladylike, sit still, they start this training of girls and taking them out of alignment with their fullness at a very young age, whereas boys are allowed to embrace their natural playful side, and so they're not as shunned for being active. But both boys and girls have a natural desire to be aware of their environment and notice everything too, but we subdue that with girls more than we do with boys. So it's mostly due to the conditioning of a person's culture that would contribute to the more classification of that with boys than girls. And I think people look for it more in boys than girls, and they just assume to call it something else when it comes to girls. But
you analyze that beautifully, because now you think about it, and yes, we do with girls. Now, don't forget you're a girl. You sit down, be good, and you've got a little dress on, and, do this and this. And we do that from the beginning of time, I think, with them. But boys, we don't. I mean, when a boy is running around, we will always turn around and say, well, that's typical boys. That's what they do.
We allow them, yes. We certainly allow them to stay into their natural being more, which is why girls have more anxiety. Because that anxiety, and anxiety, by the way, is the #1 diagnosis worldwide, because that fear that's placed into a person when they're asked to squelch part of their being, and they're taught to be afraid, especially girls. Don't go there. You're a girl. You can't go by yourself. Don't do this by yourself because you're a girl.
Don't do this. Don't do that. Everything's don't. No.
Exactly. We start to enable this dependency of, and then we wonder why many think that they can't do without a man, because we've trained them into that. And so that's the beauty of the Sacredtherapy process, is bringing people back into the fullness. I help them to see the only difference between a man and a woman is our genitalia. We both have the same God source. We both have the same energy. We have upper body versus lower body strength. But other than that, we are soul-filled beings, period. And that they can do anything and everything a man can do in terms of having a free sense around the world. And so I think that when we talk about mental health in general, what we're talking about is helping people to understand that they came forth as a well-being and got distracted along their way. That's why I don't like the term that the medical model uses called disorders. I don't like that word because it's not in alignment with the laws of creation. Because for something to come into being, it's the same whether it's well-being or dis-ease. As metaphysicians, we hyphenate the word. And so I call it a reaction. So when anxiety or ADHD or bipolar, any of these things come back, they're usually a reaction to something versus someone being born that way.
Okay, so what you're doing, you're actually making it more simplistic for people to understand exactly what they think is wrong with them when there's really nothing wrong with them. It's something that's been built up inside of them that they sort of carry along with them. And that's something very hard for people to do, is to let go of so much stuff that they really don't know. And that word of let go is like a majority of people say, well, how do you let go? How do you just don't have a handbag and you drop it? How do you let go of stuff within you? So maybe you could elaborate on that. How do people let go of so many of these no's and don'ts and this, and you're a woman, you can't do that, you're a man, you can't do that. So many of these things. How does somebody let go? How does a woman let go of these inner feelings?
What I've done in the book is I've come up with what I call the Sacredtherapy Bill of Rights. And in these Bill of Rights, what I have done is help people. It's in the step on conditioning, because it's the conditioning that took people out of their sense of who they are in the first place.
Yes.
And so as I describe for them the conditioning and the memes, a meme being a unit of thought that got passed down without their permission, that once they start seeing where some of these things came from, they get to see that they had no contribution to it, and that they get to choose their own meaning that they want to attach to the things that's happening in their life. And so many people naturally want to please their parents, or they want to please the church, or they want to please society, but I help them understand that they came forth as an individual and that they have a right to please themselves, and that many people haven't even thought about what their beliefs are. They just got them passed down and accepted them without airing them out. And so the Sacredtherapy Bill of Rights helps them to see the unspoken rights that they had all along, that they took for granted and that they thought they needed permission to have. And so for women, it's been tremendously helpful to them, because I can't tell you how many letters I get from people saying that they Xerox the copy of the Bill of Rights, have it on their bathroom wall, and they read it every morning before they go to work, remembering that they have the right to say no. They have the right to be happy. They have the right to live the life they came forth to live.
And what you're actually saying is that they've never actually acknowledged themselves as a human being, as a person. They never
didn't know they could. They didn't seem to know that they could, because they were so conditioned into believing that they had to conform and comply with other people's definitions of what's right and wrong.
Is this because of, a lot of young people, well, any age of that actually, do not care for their mothers. My mother did this to me and I will never forgive her, and I hear an awful lot of what mothers did. And I mean, a mother is not given a book how to bring up a child, but a mother has it from herself. So what's been passed down to her, she's now passing on down to her daughter or son. But also they're saying, well, I don't want to do anything my mother did, but they're they end up kind of doing the same thing.
Because of the modeling.
The modeling, it like goes down, and then you see it and you watch it and you say, well, I'm not going to do anything like my mother, and you actually watch them doing the same thing as their mother did. And it seems to be something that's very hard to change, as to let that person that you brought into the world be their own human being, and just try to teach them and guide them of life rather than telling them what they should and shouldn't do.
Exactly. You hit on a very important point, especially with women. I do think that women and mothers get a raw deal here, because the mothers are only passing on. Nobody's meaning to hurt their children. They're only passing on what they've been told is right or wrong themselves. And so this whole permission seeking versus people understanding that their permissions are internal. They were always soul felt. And so if we can learn to trust our own internal guidance system versus looking outside of ourselves to what mommy thinks, what daddy thinks, what auntie thinks, what society thinks, or what the church thinks, but understand that everybody has that same equal amount of that universal source within them. and that their opinion counts. I say it matters. And so once they tap into that, they understand all of the reframing of all of the diagnosis that I give it from such a positive place that they now are able to take back that power, which is a metaphysician, we call the energy basis of it, from a symbolic meaning point of view. Like, what does this represent? And
Yeah.
Dr. Bernie Siegel, he did the same thing even with cancer patients, saying, what is the meaning of this? Why do you think that you got this particular thing? And then they're able to look at it from a broader perspective versus just what the medical model would say, that this is what it means, this is what it represents, and this is the prognosis. But how we describe things is so important, Ninon, because that's the difference between the quality of a person's life or the lack of quality of their life if they're not able to look at things from a positive point of view, because serotonin can only be released if we think of it and think thoughts that release serotonin, and those are going to be a broader perspective. But if we're thinking of it as I'm sick and defective, we're going to release brain chemistry such as cortisol that's going to make you feel depressed and anxious and out of alignment. So some of it is brain chemistry that's tapped into or plugged into what I call universal mind, and I show illustrations of that in my book so that people can understand that their brain chemistry and their mind are two separate things.
Absolutely. But do you think that a lot of these, I'm going to go into the younger generation and their mothers, and do you think that they should sort of try to have a conversation rather than an argument, try to sit down and each have a conversation about it? It's like if I turn around and say, well, my mother never did such and such a thing. Well, rather than saying that, say, you know, why did this happen this way? So is there an easier way of getting into it so they can actually have a conversation to start understanding each other? Because the child is now, say, 25 or whatever, and the mother's, say, 50, whatever. So we're talking about two human beings. There's just a bit of age difference, that's all. And a mother and a daughter. But why can't we get this sort of connection going rather than this argument? Oh, my daughter doesn't understand me, my mother hates me, and all this crazy stuff, because I've got a neighbor next door that has this all the time, and I'm saying, no, you're just individual, and I'm trying to, you know, help them because I understand it because I'm on the outside, so I can understand it a little better. How do we get that evolved? Because that's obviously what you do.
I think that this generation gap is what we call metaphysically a vibrational gap, and what that means is oftentimes adults, whether they're mothers or fathers, they believe that they have the matter down. They feel they've lived life in the physical enough and that they want to show these new souls that come forth how it's done. But the new souls come forth with the sense of freedom that hasn't been broken, and they know they're supposed to live this joyful existence, and their parents are telling them that the world's not safe, and they're saying, yes, it is, and they're saying, no, it's not. So they bump heads because the parents think that the world's not safe and they have to protect and control and squelch their young child's physical experience to keep them safe. Whereas the young child is thinking, something's wrong with my parent. They're out of alignment, and they can recognize their parents out of alignment because the parent is coming from fear. And anytime we're coming from fear, we are out of alignment. So the parent is mad that the child recognizes their fear and doesn't respect their fear, and the child can't respect something that's not aligned. And
but
so,
also you've got 25 years difference, because I'm talking about 20. You've got 25 years of total difference.
But it's the same source. It's the same God source within them, regardless of the age span. And so if they could use that as their place of connection and understanding, child of mine, I understand you have the same source within you that informs you and guides you and leads you that I have. So I'm going to trust that you're going to honor your own internal guidance just as I'm honoring mine. And I'm going to trust that all will work out well. Then there won't be this bumping against each other's heads of believing that the adult has to control the child.
Okay, so it's trusting. This is trusting. This is a matter of trusting each other, trusting each other's feelings.
And trusting the source within each other. Trusting that source works.
Is that trusting yourself?
Well, yeah. If you can trust that part, yes, what you're saying is absolutely right, Ninon. If we can trust the fact that that source is guiding us and trust that every other soul that comes forth has it too, then we don't have to trust that I know my daughter or son will do the right thing, will trust that that source within them is guiding them to do the right thing. And then we don't have to be so upset with them wanting something different. But most parents want their children to turn out the way they want them to turn out. They want them to do what they want them to do versus recognizes that they also came forth with their own divine intention.
Well, that's true too, but a mother might turn around and say, I want them to do what I want them to do. Well, hang in a second. There happens to be a father or a man involved somewhere around this arena, because otherwise we don't have a child. So let's flip over now to the fathers, because the father a lot of the time takes a back seat. But at the same time, the father is the strength in the family. I mean, regardless, he's still the man in the house, and it's still sort of, we rely on that strength a lot in our households when we fall in love and we love the man and we have a couple of children. He is kind of, you know, that strength there. How does that all work with the children, with the father?
I think it's very similar. They're both parents, as I said a little while ago. The only difference between men and women from my model is the genitalia. That men have the same desires as women and women have the same desires as men. It's just the conditioning and socialization that changes that path and decides, well, this is okay and this is for men and this is for women. But if we stop putting people in those boxes, love is love and guidance is guidance. And so, but when women look to men, or daughters and sons look to fathers to be the protector and the mother to be the nurturer, versus realizing that those aspects can come from both genders, that it's not gender related at all.
No, and
purity and they'll ever find will be within themselves, and allow the fact that their parents are also people too, that they're not all knowing of what this soul should do. Then they won't get so hung up in expecting parents to be perfect and parents expecting their kids to follow their roadmap. And so I think that it's communication and an opportunity for each to talk about what they want, because when I was the director of mental health in the school board, most kids were scared to talk to their parents because they felt most of their parents would not listen and would not understand. And even
that happens to be true. That has 100% true. And the reason I know that is because I had a TV show for the younger generation for 16 years. And it was amazing how they had this miscommunication, and the parents would never understand the kids. And I gave them a platform to be able to speak out and to be able to have a little time of their own and understand themselves, that you do have a voice. And I wanted people out there, and I wanted parents especially, please listen to your child. When your child comes up to you, wants to have a conversation with you, don't start talking about your story. Their attention span is 1 second, and they're gone. So that's how children are. But and you know, like right now, they're saying the children are so rude and so bad now. And I just wrote something on Facebook. I said, it's nothing to do with the children. We're not helping them. We're supposed to teach them and show them. They're kids. They don't know.
Well, that's why I quoted in my book, Kahil Gibran, the prophet's thing, that your children are not your children, that they're the sons and the daughters of life longing for itself, that they come through us, but they're not from us. And so I love that, because he underlines the fact that they are individual expressions of this source just as we are. So it's wonderful that you had a show to give them that platform, because when we let other people's voice drown out our own, then we're always going to be in a place of misalignment and unhappiness, because we're squelching parts of ourselves for the wrong reasons. And
we are. But now we're going to go into this day and age, which you and I are both very much involved in, you probably more so at this particular subject. We have the computers, we have the cell phones, we have the texting, we have all this stuff. And there was a photo on Facebook, and it was all these young people, teenagers, and all they had was their head bent down, and they're all doing this, and they're all, you know, they're all alone. Not one of them was talking to each other. So where are we going with our generation? Definitely the younger generation, but some of the older people are doing it too. But the younger generation has definitely evolved in themselves in this. Where are we going with this? No socialization going on.
I think that the social media is basically what I call extended consciousness, in the sense that in some ways it's really, really hip and cool because it removes the one-on-one interaction that we crave in one sense, but on the other sense, it also really is a magnification of what I'm talking about. It makes you connect on a soulful level. You're not looking at the person, you're really communicating heart to heart with a lot of this. And so you're taking in a bunch of information constantly in this information age. And so it has people more impatient because they're used to getting things so fast. But to me, that's a magnification of the fact that information and knowledge is around us and it's coming to us. We have 60,000 thoughts a day, even if we're not online. And so this, to me, is a magnification of that. So it can be a profound pathway to help people connect who are lonely, who can't get out. And this is one way that it's really helped with the playing field of women with dating, because with outside of these dating sites, they wouldn't usually go up to a man. But now the dating site has leveled the playing field where they can now send a wink or contact someone as an equal basis. So it's really leveled that playing field. But in terms of becoming social again and getting outside and playing football and getting off of the computer, I love the solution that the creator of this thing called Meetup.com came with. He said, people aren't meeting up anymore, so in America they have this thing called Meetup.com so that people will get from behind the screens, go out and connect with people again doing like-minded things. And so I see the utility of all of it as being part of a whole, not any of it being damaging, but I think it's a way to balance it. I think balance is what we're talking about here.
Yeah, it is, and it is what we're talking about. I just love the way you presented that, because you didn't say anything was bad, that there was a good reason behind all what we're doing, and we're not, so this is not negative, and this is not negative, and this is not negative, and using all of it in different ways in different parts of your life. And yes, I know all about Meetup, and Meetup is a great thing because it does get, and also social events they have and networking events they have where people can actually start meeting up. And I think a lot of people are starting to do that even more so now, realizing that, oh, there is a life out there and I can, but also the people that are shy and have these dating programs, I have no idea where to go, especially a woman. But
Exactly.
even men have that too. We always say, oh, women are the shy ones, but hey, wait a second, there's a lot of shy men there, you know?
It is, but I think since society has condoned men to be the one to go and ask a woman, I think the shy men love the fact that there's this internet, because now they can be approached without having to make the first step. So but I think socially, many have been conditioned that it's their job. So it took the pressure off of them too.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I think as you put it very nicely, that sort of kind of what's happening to the world is everybody's reaching everybody, and it doesn't even matter what country you're in anymore. I mean, you can be going on a vacation to Italy and you meet somebody through the dating game, whatever it is, and you could actually meet them there, and you can actually have a nice time, and you might like them, you might not, and you can just walk off if you want to, which is a freeing feeling of your own, that if I don't like this person, I can go left.
Exactly.
So you don't have to stick with this person or do anything. So now, where are you going now? You have a private practice. Now, how can people get hold of your private practice?
Well, I'm licensed to diagnose and treat in the state of Florida, but with my book, From Psychotherapy to Sacredtherapy, I'm also a certified life coach. So people all over the world can have a Sacredtherapy life coaching session with me through a medium like this, like Skype or Google Plus, or through the phone, and I will coach them through the 8 steps if they need to, because the book is created to be a self-help program, but for those who have wanted to have a question answered or a second opinion, I've had people from Australia, from South America, from Europe. It's just a wonderful thing that they can access me online. So that's one way. They can reach me at DrAmeliaKemp.com. That's DrAmeliaKemp.com. That's one way. Or they can follow me on Facebook, where I put up a inspirational poster each week based on, I have a radio show
Yeah.
called From Psychotherapy to Sacred Therapy, and it's only designed to go through the 8 steps with people. So it's not this format where I'm not interviewing anyone. We just talk about the 8 steps each week, because it's 24 exercises in the book. So
Yeah.
each week we cover something, and I try to motivate them and keep them fortified with that. So it's a beautiful process.
It's a very good. Now, you obviously charge for it. You have a price for this, right?
Yes.
Yes. So you have a
Absolutely.
price, and you also do have a price for your book, or do you give it away?
Oh no, the book is available at Amazon.com and most booksellers, and the book is $21.95 in paperback. But if they want the ebook on Kindle, Nook, or iPad, it's only $9.99 there.
Okay.
And as far as the consults go, they can have a half hour or 45 minutes or an hour, and so those range from $60 to $120, depending on the amount of time they like to
At
spend.
the time they want. You and I have very similar programs. It's so funny because I'm listening to you. We have a very similar thing going on, because I do the same thing, but mine's in media and teaching them actually how to have their own program and do their own thing and produce their own stuff. Like you
Oh,
have a radio show, you could also actually have an internet show as well, internet TV show.
I'll have to
Great.
talk to you about that.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I just got a customer. You got a
You
customer.
might have a new client.
Yeah, I got a new client now. Now, where are you going from here? You've just written this book, correct?
Yes, ma'am. It came out in January of this year, and so I'm doing a 10-city book tour. So I've been going around. I'm doing book signings and lectures all over, and we're coming up. Actually, Jack Canfield, who was featured on The Secret, and he's done this Chicken of the Soup series, if people are familiar with his name, has
Yeah.
invited me to speak along with him and 8 other experts in Long Beach, California this coming October. So I'll be there. Also, I'll be in Washington, D.C. in September, and in Sedona, Arizona in August for Labor Day weekend. I'm doing a Sacred Therapy retreat. So anyone who wants one-on-one intensive weekend with the 8 steps is welcome. We still have space there in Sedona Labor Day weekend. So you can go to my website and register there for that. And
Okay, tell your website. What was your website again for them?
it's DrAmeliaKemp.com, DrAmeliaKemp.com, and just click on the retreats link there, and you can sign up for Sedona, and we'll have a great time there as well.
Now, when you have these retreats, what exactly do you actually present to them? Is it about them? Is it about what has happened to them in the past? Do you bring in your life and what you did and how you did it? What is involved in this?
Because the retreats are just a weekend, and it's all about them, so it's very intensive. It's about the 8 steps of the book, and so
Yes.
basically most time is spent in steps 6 through 8, where we're actually dealing with the procreation process of bringing the life they want to live into fruition. But many come forth to these workshops just really wanting to tweak some of the steps personally. They want to get my opinion on it. So each person gets an hour with me at the retreat one-on-one, where they get to get into any of their specific details. But in addition to that, mostly it's introspective work that we're doing. Now, Sedona is unique because we're going to be visiting the 4 of the vortexes there, and experiencing some of that energy versus my mountain retreats where we pretty much stay still. So this one will be a little more unique, but it still gives people a chance to get into some of the work, have me right there at hand for me to help guide them through it. We do some silent retreat. It's really helping them to reconnect with that inner spirit with them, because so many are so busy during the year, they don't really take time to listen to their own voice. And so this gives them a chance to tweak that, to get to know that, harness it, and then go home revived, ready to go.
It's funny, we get so busy we forget how to live.
That's it. That's
We
it.
get so involved in everything.
I say we become human doings instead of human beings.
Yeah, well, and absolutely true. We just seem to forget what life is, and we're always working and always doing something and always. And you've got to sit back and say, what am I doing? And is this possible? Should I do this? Or is this going to get me anywhere? Is this going to be any purpose in my life? And I think we need to actually sort of understand And I've always said, you know, go to your bedroom. Because I think your bedroom is a very sacred place. I always say, go to your bedroom, just totally relax and really don't think or say anything. Just sort of try to gather your life of what you're doing, how you're doing it, why you're doing it, where do you want to go, and what are your priorities, and what's important to you.
Exactly.
That's what you teach.
That's exactly it. That's what we're doing there. We take time in these worksheets that I give them to answer those types of questions, and they get to have it in that quiet space. That silent voice within is louder when they're in the silence. And so I help them to understand who they are, mind, body, and spirit, versus them thinking that they have to embrace any specific path. They get to understand their own inner voice. I call inner knowing.
Inner knowledge, yeah. What has been the greatest success story that you've ever had with a woman, I'm going to say, that you've looked back at it and you've said, wow, I really, you know, really got this woman to understand who she was, what she was, why she was?
I have to admit, there's been so many. I think what's most recent with the book was a woman who contacted me and said that she literally had a gun in her hand. And when she remembered that she bought my book and that I told her when she met me at the conference to read my section on suicide, it's called Ending the Matter, she remembered to go get the book and read that, and she said she didn't want to do it after that. And that made me cry, made her cry. I mean, it was like she said it saved her life. And so that's so powerful to me, for someone to have been willing to share that with me. And so that's the type of transformation that going from psychotherapy to sacred therapy, that big difference. She had never heard the take on suicide ideation that way before. And the way I put it in the book helped her realize that she could, in fact, restore that ascension that people are looking for when they have suicidal ideation, is to reconnect back with the well-being, which is the source of them. And once I convinced her in that step that she could reconnect right here in the physical realm, that she didn't have to go back to the non-physical to get that, it made the difference for her. So that's the most recent.
What gets a person to that point of wanting to, funny you should bring that up, because I've got a friend of mine just sent me an email telling me his brother wants to commit suicide, so this is quite appropriate to what's going on. And this is a man. What brings somebody to that point of wanting to just completely feel they're no good to the world, they're nothing, and they want to just, insecurity? What is it?
I don't think that it's insecurity. I think that it's fatigue. They're tired of trying to reach for the well-being and the joy that they knew they came forth to live, and they hadn't been able to accomplish it. So there's a sense of feeling the need to give up, and they feel that they've exhausted all of the ways they could think of doing it, and so now they know that they could feel better, and they believe that they could feel better if they could reconnect back with the source of their being. And so they're only trying to realign with well-being. So it's not a sense of having given up wanting to be happy. They're still going for it, and they feel that that's the solution. My hope is that they can see that they can still reconnect right here without having to do the ascension back to the source of their being, because the source of their being is here with them now. Many don't realize it. They think they have to go to the non-physical to reconnect with the source. But the source is within them and omnipresent, always with us.
I was going to say, they're walking around with it. They're walking with it. They're with it every 24 hours a day. They're with it.
Exactly. But many
just have to find it.
They lose sight of that because many think that they have to go only through a religious path in order to connect with that. And if that's not their preference, they run out of options oftentimes. And so sometimes depression, it becomes brain chemistry too. So if they're only focusing on the negative aspects of their life, they're releasing tremendous loads of cortisol, and they don't realize it's the cortisol that's making them feel worse and worse and worse. And Absolutely. So once we can help them to intentionally focus on at least what's neutral and other things that are hopeful, then they can release the serotonin that will release the natural healing endorphins in the brain and feel their sense of well-being. And so that's so important.
Understanding themselves, who they are, what they are, why they're here, and what they're thinking of. Why do so many people, and this happens a lot, when a catastrophe happens or something, they always direct themselves to God. They always say, well, I prayed to God, and I prayed to this, and I did this, and then they have why did this happen to me? Why did God make this happen to me? All of a sudden, God's like sort of, within them that they haven't really thought of for probably many years. Why does it always happen?
I think that because at that platform, at the top of one mountain is the bottom of another one, and so when somebody's in crisis, it gets real clear. It gets real clear all of the nonsense, and I call that word intentionally nonsense. Their senses are now activated because the nonsensing of the fullness of who they are was dull. But once they're in this crisis mode, they now are reaching for a solution. And so in reaching for that solution, they cut through the chase and they go right back to the source. And that's why it seems as if they're not faking it. They're not like all of a sudden. It's just that now they're more aware of it and they're now willing to access it. And so they want to connect with it as quickly as possible.
That's interesting because they always do that. Now, what do we do about, a lot of people are having divorces and families and things are getting all mixed up and they don't have time and one word is said and I'm getting a divorce. We kind of got into a place here where, why did they get married in the first place? How do we help these people out there that can actually try to bring this back together again?
I think that when it comes to divorce, sometimes divorce is indicated if it means that the person is no longer able to get their needs met in that relationship, that it may have been a temporary sacred contract in the first place, that it may not have been longevity. But for those who prematurely make that decision to exit a relationship because they feel that the person no longer is able to meet them in a place of joy, sometimes it's because they're looking outside of themselves and saying that they want the husband or wife to have responsibility for their happiness. And anytime we look outside of ourselves and say, it's your job to make me happy, we're in trouble. Because it's not the spouse's job to make them happy. It's their own job to make them happy. Two happy people are in a relationship and that's why we say like attracts like. But if one's unhappy and one's happy, and the other one who's unhappy refuses to do the work to bring themselves back into alignment with that place of joy, sometimes it's very difficult for that other spouse to be in an environment where it's no longer a vibrational match to the joyful life that they know exists. So they to go ahead and do what they have to do and leave that.
So sometimes they're going into a marriage with the wrong intentions. They're going in that they're going to cure me and they're going to take care of me and they're going to, make me happy.
And I think that at the beginning they believe that the person can because both of them are summoning from each other the best aspects of each other. But it's as soon as they notice differences, then they start to go from what they call a we-ness to a you-ness to a me-ness. You.
It was we, and then it's you, and now it's me.
Exactly. And so until they get to a place where they can accept that the other person doesn't have to agree with every choice they make. Many couples expect their spouse to agree on everything. And if they can't accept that we can agree to disagree on many things and still have a harmonious union, then it's going to be difficult to maintain that type of relationship.
It's going to go sour. It's going to go if you're not willing to sort of listen to your inner self and have compassion. And it is compassion or understanding to somebody else that's supposedly very, very dear to you, and it breaks apart. And I'm not opposed to people getting divorces because if you don't want to live together and be together, then don't. That's perfectly fine. And another thing I want to ask you is businesses. We have a lot of stress in the business world right now. A lot of especially older men that have been fired from jobs and they've become, taken over by maybe somebody younger that they pay less to. And there's a lot of things going on in the business circle, corporations. Do you ever deal with any of that, how somebody can keep their business together? which is dealing with people?
I think that when it comes to the evolution of careers and maintaining as people get older in a career, and there's this same thing we were talking about almost with the generational gap between youth and older people. It's the same way with corporations. They evolve and they're always looking for the latest, greatest technology and information out there. And so some of what they consider in their businesses as the dinosaurs that's been around forever and not willing to embrace those changes or acknowledge them, sometimes there again becomes, it's no longer a vibrational match. And so that's how some get moved out. But for if they want to keep their jobs, that they're going to have to stay on top of the technology and the information and be open and receptive to changes. But many people, whether it's in marriage, whether it's in business, whether it's in parent-child, they really have difficulty with change. And so if they can embrace change and expect change and know that everything's evolving all the time, because many of the older clients that I've had the privilege of talking to about this, many times they say, it's not like the good old days. And I'm like, what good old days? You know, the good old days is today.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're living today. Today is
now. And so now has to be that moment that we seize, not yesterday's glories, that we need to be creating new exciting
today's glory. Today's glory. What can we do today? It's funny how so many people do not want to change. The younger generation don't even know what change is because they're changing all the time without even knowing it, because they're getting themselves into all the. But the older person, it's very hard to get them to change anything. And they don't like. And in this day and age, unless you change, you're not going anywhere.
I think that change is the number one reason for conditioning, because conditioning states that, you know, just stay right here in this little box and everything will be fine, and anything outside of that box can be very threatening for people if they're not willing to knock those boxes down. We have what we call in society a normative curve, and anything over here is too much and anything over here is too little. But if we were to embrace that all of human experience is going beyond the box and allow all of it to be acceptable, then many people wouldn't have to feel so threatened when changes occurred. They'd say like, oh, here's some more expansion, versus, oh my God, the world's changing, it's going apart. It's not going apart. It's just growing, it's evolving, it's a beautiful thing.
Well, that's what I happen to love change, and I guess we create all the time because that's who we are, and that's, you know, what we are. We love all that change. We love all that stuff. What do you think about there's so many people now are now working out of their homes? Is that a good idea to work out of your home, or is it better to get up and go to an office or do something?
I think it's strictly preference. I love the fact that the flexibility exists for us. Some people are natural creators at home. We all come forth as creators, so we can create just as well at home as we can in a building. And so the freedom of a person having that choice to be able to have a lifestyle that doesn't include having to get on the road and be congested in traffic and ease more into their day may suit their natural rhythms better than someone who may do better in a structured environment, because some people need that. So I think it's individual. I don't think it's any right or wrong way. I just think it's the flexibility and the diversity that it presents that's wonderful.
That's wonderful. Well, that's kind of our day and age right now. And on that note, we've come to the end of the hour. And Dr. Amelia Kemp, you've been absolutely amazing. You are very knowledgeable, and you're very down to earth as to all the answers. And it's just coming from within your heart and who you are. And just don't be afraid of who you are. I just want to thank you so much for coming on. You've been amazing. And they can get your book on your website.
They can get it at Amazon.com.
Amazon.
Or most booksellers, yes.
Wonderful. And they need that book because it's 8 ways, right? 8 ways to sort of get...
8 steps to well-being, from psychotherapy.
8 steps to well-being to get yourself back in order. Don't be afraid. To my audience out there, thank you so much for tuning in to Nina Speaks Media Image, and also embracing my guest, who was Dr. Amelia Kemp. And we will see you next week. Thank you so much. Take care. Thank you again. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Ninon, can you hear me? Ninon, can you hear me? I wanted to say bye. Maybe, I guess we hung up, huh? Okay.